My name is Amber Fonte. I am an avid Detroit sports fan and a school principal. If you're a fan and a school leader like me, when someone asks you what's the single greatest goal that you have for your team, your answer's simple: win more games. And in the case of schools, raise student achievement. But even though the goal is crystal clear, getting there can require a great game plan. And honestly, in both sports and schools, sometimes these plans can be overly complex and the gains and the wins just never materialize. Over the last few years, I've been working really hard. I wanted to find a few key ideas that would help us to achieve our goal to raise student achievement. I'm super excited to share with you student-centered coaching. A game plan that changes everything by helping the team answer this question: in the game of school improvement, who should we focus on? Another simple answer that honestly is right in front of our face. See, if we want our schools to improve, then we have to look out at the players on the field, our students. Student-centered coaching is different than other school improvement initiatives because it keeps our eyes on the students and it changes the way that the game in the classroom is played. So, to help us understand student-centered coaching, we're going to take this game-based analogy just a little bit deeper, and we're going to explain how student-centered coaching is different. All student-centered coaching is going to start with a cycle where teachers, we're going to actually call them coaches, plan a learning goal for students. In order to help their players or students improve, coaches must determine what skill they're going to develop. See, many teachers and principals just allow the curriculum to define the learning goal for the student. But student-centered coaching is actually going to ask us to take a close look at our standards in order to choose a learning goal for our students. For a sample student-centered coaching cycle, we're going to use a simple trifold. This trifold is going to give us a visual of all of the curricular units for the year. This is for a typical math classroom in 3rd grade, and in this particular unit, we're focusing on the relationship of multiplication and division. In many classrooms, teachers would begin this unit by just diving right into the teaching without taking any time by figuring out where their students or players need to develop. Now, if you had to help your players run a faster 40-yard dash, what's the first thing that you do? It seems simple, right? You'd have your players line up on the starting line, you'd get that stopwatch out, and you would have them run that dash. You'd record their times, and then you'd come up with target drills in order to help them improve. In fact, you might even split them into groups, your slower players and your faster players. Now let's replicate that in a classroom using the student-centered coaching approach. Our key is to choose a learning goal that we can use to measure the student's current skills. For this example, I'm going to use my 3rd grade math unit that's focused on this learning goal of the relationship between multiplication and division. I'm actually going to come up with a goal that I'll write down. So it says, 85% of my students will demonstrate the relationship between inverse operation using multiplication and division. And it comes to us from the standard 3.08.7. Whoa! Back up for a second. Coach Fonte, what exactly does inverse operations mean? Good thing I actually taught 3rd grade, and I've had some great tools that have helped me to unpack the standards. See, as a 3rd grade teacher, I had to learn that inverse operations is simply talking about mathematical opposites. So if you think about addition, what would be the opposite? Subtraction. And if you think about multiplication, what would be the opposite? You got it, division. So another thing that 3rd grade teachers, when they're doing this unit, typically talk about is something called fact families. So for this example, if our fact family is 3, 7, and 21, we might teach our students these two multiplication facts and then the opposite division facts that look like this. Now that I understand my learning standard, I understand my goal, now it's time that I can measure it. So I should be able to come up with a way in order to create a pre-assessment. Now I know what you're thinking. I've actually even thought it too. Sometimes pre-assessments can seem like a complete waste of time. Let's take this for example. Here is my curricular unit. I actually even have my learning goal here. Use your knowledge of multiplication fact families to solve this problem, 21 divided by 3 from the following. And I've given them some choices. What are my students going to do? Well, some of my students, in fact, oftentimes many of my students know nothing, so they circle nothing. And what do I gain from this? Well, not very much. Maybe some of my students use the eeny, meeny, miny, mo method to come up with answers, and maybe some of my students accidentally even circle the right answer. Is that really giving me anything visual that I can go on? In fact, it would kind of remind me if I was a coach and I passed out a piece of paper to all of my players and said, just circle how quickly you can run the 40-yard dash. We all know that that wouldn't work. So instead, I'm going to design my pre-assessment more strategically. Very simply, I'm going to take my learning target, which is use your knowledge of multiplication facts families to solve this problem. I'm going to write it down, and then I'm going to pass it out and see what students come up with. So maybe one of my students comes up with this. They draw 3 circles, they put 7 dots inside. What does this show me? Well, this student actually has some knowledge that multiplication works in groups. Maybe one of my students comes up with this. They've actually listed all the multiplication fact families, and then they are able to come up with the right answer. And this is my personal favorite. I've got some students that show me this. They know 3 equals 3 sticks, and that 21 has 2 groups of 5 sticks in one, and then they actually draw me a family. See, the way that I'm going to coach my students from these 2 groups is very different, but I know that I can help each of these students in order to improve. So we would collect these pre-assessments, we would sort them into stacks, and wow, now I have a great idea of how I'm going to coach these players to improve. So let's imagine that this teacher coach spends the next 2 weeks working on learning targets about fact families. She's going to model how to use those fact families to explore mathematical opposite relationships, and maybe she's lucky enough to have an instructional coach. That instructional coach comes alongside, does some mini co-teaching modeling, and measures all the student progress. Even the principal coach can get in on this action. During a walkthrough, the principal coach watches a student as they're making progress downfield. The principal coach leans in and asks, "Can you tell me what a fact family is?" And finally, the team is prepped, it's game day, and it's time for the post-assessment. Now notice how the post-assessment looks a lot like the pre-assessment. It's almost identical, but we have our players take this post-assessment, and then we collect the results. And ladies and gentlemen, we are on the 40, the 30, the 20, touchdown! And in this game, there is no penalty for excessive celebration. In fact, it's strongly encouraged. Look at the growth of our students. Look at the growth of our coaches. Look at the growth of our teachers. In fact, the most important thing is to celebrate all of that growth and then do it again and again and again and again until we are closing the achievement gap. This student-centered coaching is a simple way to improve student achievement by focusing our efforts on our students, by creating measurable standards-based goals and improving skills with student-friendly learning targets. It creates results that can be celebrated by teachers, by coaches, by principals, by parents, by all of us. And it is a game changer in the job that we have to win the game of raising student achievement.